Hello, this is Mari Grimes, and this is my audio reflection on gamification. And I'm going to be responding to two prompts. The first is gamification play? And the second is what would Zynga argue? So first of all, I wanted to know what exactly does gamification mean? And so in my very limited exploration of the internet, I found some definitions. For example, from Wikipedia, it said it's the use of game thinking and game mechanics in non-game contexts to engage users in solving problems. According to Badgeville.com, gamification is a concept of applying game mechanics and game design to engage and motivate people to achieve their goals. And this can be through the use of badges and other types of status and achievement. And the purpose is for engagement, influence, loyalty, user-generated content. And then according to Newton.com, gamification is the use of game design elements in non-game contexts. Based upon some of my research, I determined there's some highly desired benefits of gamification to business. They're able to drive desired user behaviors that are advantageous to their brand, which will, of course, increase engagement, and I would add profits. And they do this by rewarding users who accomplish desired tasks. For example, reward programs, my favorites are Starbucks and Pinkberry. You use the card, you go there enough, and then you get a free, you get a free product. Even in education, MIT's Education Arcade said that here are some great benefits of gamification. We have more persistence, we have greater risk-taking, greater attention to detail, greater problem solving. So I would say generally, based upon, again, this limited data set, I would define gamification at least in the kind of modern context, as the use of game thinking theory to impel some type of action on the part of users or quote-unquote players who may or may not play the game for benefits outside of those derived strictly from the act of play. So, rather than playing for the act of playing, there's some benefits that players might get, and this is what gamification is all about. So, the next prompt was, well, would Huizinga, however you say the author's name, say that gamification is play? And I say absolutely not. And if you take a look at what he characterizes as play, you'll get a better understanding of why gamification is not play. So, for existence, the author says, play is connected with no material interest and no profit can be gained from it. Well, so obviously, what businesses are doing is cashing in on user behavior, which is captured whenever someone, quote-unquote, plays their game. So, of course, this is in direct conflict to what the author says in terms of there is not supposed to be any material interest and no profit. Again, not an example of play. The author says that play is free and that it's freedom and that it's voluntary and that being ordered to play is essentially not play. Well, this is an example. This doesn't even happen in education. In many classrooms, games are seen as a necessary part of the curriculum, and students have no say, whether they get to participate or not. And teachers often view it as a novel way to make learning more engaging, but don't provide students with the opportunity to say, yes, I want to do this, or no, I do not. The authors also say that play is never a task. It is only urgent to the extent that the need for enjoyment is urgent to the person participating in play. So another example in education, which I saw from blended learning last week, is that students at the beginning of class were literally given their task sheet for the day, and games often were included on that list. So again, games were literally seen as a task that students were required to perform. Again, directly in conflict with what the author says is play. And I just wanted to provide kind of my own experience with gamification. This actually happened at Hugsy in my first year in the EDLD program. And it was in this class called Leaders of Learning, and they were trying to introduce this new concept of gamification. So each week we were given a different subject that we were supposed to dive deeper into, very similar to this class. And we had to read something and then demonstrate our learning, or demonstrate how we made meaning through some type of, what we would call some uncommon type of learning process. So through a podcast, through a video, through a Prezi, through a cartoon, it was really up to the student to drive how they wanted to demonstrate their learning. And if we successfully met the expectations of the learning team, we earned a badge, which was then shown on a shared website where students were able to see where they stood in comparison with their peers in terms of completion of work. And it was a really, just a disaster. So I just wanted to provide some feedback from one of my colleagues, and what she said was that class felt very incoherent, that it made a series of disconnected, isolated hoops to jump through rather than organized, coherence around real learning and meaning making. She found the badge system to be a form of compliance and box checking. For example, if you summarize a text, if you pass a test, if you upload a document, if you cite your sources properly, then you get a badge. And it was more about doing the work for the badge rather than about thinking or growing in your learning. And so in our own collective experience as a cohort with gamification, we experienced many of the things that the author would describe as not as play. We didn't have any freedom concerning, how we participated or interacted with the content. It was very, very task-based. It was very ordinary. It was very boring. It was very frustrating. And really, to top it off, it was very hard to understand. It was disordered. It was incoherent, which, of course, according to the author, again, is not what he would define as play. So I guess in conclusion, this kind of goes to show that there's a great gulf between the idea of play in today's modern world that is constantly changing, in part due to technological advances, and between the theory of the author, which was postulated in 1950, which again, might play into why there's this big gulf between the idea of what gamification and play is in comparison to what the world was like and what play was considered to be in the 1950s. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing your comments and reflections.